everyone, and welcome to the third episode of Okay, Now What? This week you have Thomas, Robin, Jason, and me, Greg. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm pretty sure y'all have heard about Marjorie Taylor Greene, the QAnon Republican Congresswoman who has said death to Nancy Pelosi, who thinks wildfires here in California are made by Jewish space lasers, obviously. And Parkland was fake and mass shootings don't exist. And she so happened to be on the education committee, but today the House voted to strip her from her community titles. Maybe she can create some loony bin committee herself. I don't know. But Robin, go ahead and give me your take on this whole Marjorie Taylor nonsense.
I mean, I think it's sort of she got what she, sort of earned. Still, as a member of Congress, you're spouting QAnon theories. You're saying these horrible, horrible things. I don't know if she made a statement condemning the Capitol riots, but she got what she was putting out there. And I think she should be fully expelled from Congress. She shouldn't have a seat. It's sort of crazy to me that someone who believes that space lasers are causing California wildfires and that actively said the Sandy Hook shootings were a hoax. It was just these really awful things. How are you still a representative?
Yeah.
There should be some sort of decency qualification to Congress where if you're an active conspiracy nut, you shouldn't hold the elected seat of power. And denying the Sandy Hook shootings and trying to be on the education committee, she got what she deserves. Yay, finally. But she's just, excuse my French, but batshit. She's actually batshit insane. But yeah.
Jason, do you think she should have been removed from Congress?
Well, yeah, I would go further. I'm with Cori Bush on HR 25 that not only should somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene and the 146 other members of Congress not have any position of power within Congress, but honestly, they should all be removed from Congress for sedition. We find ourselves in Congress right now negotiating with domestic terrorists. It is ridiculous to me. But I also want to put out a thing right here because I want to move away. This is an opportunity. A situation like Marjorie Taylor Greene is an opportunity to start using some different language in our dialogue. So I don't want to call her moronic or stupid or idiotic. I am coming to learn that those are ableist terms. They are offensive, and I don't want to associate people with legitimate mental health illnesses who need support with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. So I'm going to move to using terms like ignorant, asinine, irresponsible, and offensive. And that's what she is, and that's what people like Lauren Boebert are, and Ted Cruz and Louis Gohmert and all of the other members of Congress that really tried to start a second civil war in this country. And honestly, I cannot believe that we're still here having to listen to their bullshit.
Yeah, Thomas. So a lot of people say that this is now the Republican Party, or there's going to be a third party come out, and it's going to be the Trump Party. Do you think that that's the case with Marjorie Taylor Greene?
I think so. I mean, you go back to the Obama years, and you had the Tea Party sort of come out of the Republican Party, and it just shows there's a major divide right now. And I think coming out of the Trump loss, you're going to see the fracture in the Republican Party. And I think this is this was inevitably going to happen. I think if you have both parties for years, label immigrants as a problem, sort of buy into these hate factors buy into this sort of narrative that it's not America's problem, it's other people that are causing all these problems. It creates the groundwork for these conspiracy theories and these sort of hateful mindsets. And I think this is just inevitable. I want to also bring up that another thing that happened with Taylor Greene, which that she was sued in federal court this week for blocking people on Twitter. People were criticizing her for everything that was going on, and she blocked a load of people on Twitter. And then within 48 hours, she unblocked everybody because she realized she was going to lose the federal court.
And that is something that's nice about being a candidate versus an actual elected official. Right now, I can block a bunch of people if I don't want to hear their nonsense, and I have done so. I don't.
They're just so easy to ignore, though. I mean, I
don't tangle with the where we go one, where we go all, folks. So I'll block you. But once I have an official, I gotta listen to everybody.
That's true. Now let's go ahead and move on to another person. Robin, you mentioned that you saw something on your timeline. Go ahead and mention that to us.
For sure. So I saw on this article where the Colorado representative, Lauren Boebert, she had $20,000 in a lien against her restaurant. And she paid it off, but at the same time, she got reimbursed from her campaign for $22,000 for mileage, meaning that she drove like 38,000 miles despite having no advertised events in the spring. So that's kind of like, suspect. And the ethics committee is like looking into it, but it's just, at least cover up your tracks a little better. But
I know.
Like, obviously, it's bad not to make a joke of it, but like, come on now.
Her restaurants were responsible for almost 100 people getting food poisoning at an event because she served pulled pork that had no temperature controls, had no, cool down procedures or anything. Now, I've worked in the restaurant industry. I've handled food. I know you have to very strictly regulate heating up, cooling down, storage, and everything of food products, but she didn't do that. It seems like it's inevitable for somebody like her who doesn't want any regulation on anything. And for the people who support her, that's almost a classic, here's your karma, because this is the person that you want to support. You're going to go eat at a restaurant, no regulations, you're going to get sick, maybe you die. And
I'm not Ramsay in there.
Well, I don't think he would want anything to do with her, but I'm not going to go into graphic detail on what the illness was that they got, but it was extremely messy.
Nasty, both ends, I bet.
She was also, the state also had to shut her restaurant down because she was still like operating like pre-COVID times during the pandemic. And she was warned like several times. And she just didn't listen. So then, they had to shut her down for a bit.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, gosh. Those are our representatives. Okay. Well, let's move on to something else. Thank you so much, Robin, for sharing that story. I love that. So $1,400 stimulus check updates today. Congress passes budget resolution. Eligibility, who will get it? Now, there is some controversy because it doesn't provide aid to undocumented people, and so Kamala Harris is required to break the Senate deadlock, so 51-50. The Senate voted in favor of non-binding amendment to tighten a stimulus check eligibility. Earlier this week, group of 10 Republican lawmakers had proposed a $600 billion COVID relief bill with only 1,000 stimulus checks. Luckily, that didn't happen. So Starting with you, Thomas, what do you think of all this?
I mean, if you're going to use reconciliation for something, it needs to be better than what's been passed. You could have done $2,000 every month with reconciliation. Could have done that. I also think the lack of survival checks for undocumented people is absolutely horrific. Like, it already happened last April with the first big stimulus package. They didn't do it then, and I just want to break down really, nearly more than half of our agricultural farmer sector is undocumented people. So these people who feed America, who farm for the produce that we eat, for the food that we put on our plate, they're undocumented, nearly more than half of these people. I just want to break down the statistics here. That an average farm worker family's annual income is between $17,000 and $20,000, right?
Wow.
A year, right? More than half rely on at least one public assistance program, and half of all, and basically, like the pandemic has just made these people. It's just caused so many problems for them, even at a time where they're deemed essential, and yet they're still not going to receive a survival check. And I just find it disgusting. And I just want to point out 8 Democrats voted to not give undocumented immigrants.
And let's name them. You have the names? You got them names?
Yeah.
You got the receipts? Let's hear it.
Yeah, let's get this up.
I bet you one of them was Joe Manchin.
Yes, so we had Hassan from New Hampshire. We had Hickenlooper from Colorado. We had Kelly from Arizona. We had Manchin. We had Peters. We had Sinema, if I pronounce that right.
Kristen Sinema, Arizona.
Oh, Sinema.
Stabenow and Tester. They're all the Democrats.
So yeah, you hear that? Those Republicans did that. Okay, I'm calling them Republicans.
Sinema and Manchin are the 2 votes that everybody has been worried about with everything. When are we going to get anything past the Senate if we have these 2 particular Democrats who ostensibly are going to stand in the way of everything because they are Democrats in name only. So it's unsurprising, but as we were talking before, I wanted to point out that you've got Mark Kelly and John Hickenlooper there. Those are 2 Democrats, that unseated Republicans, and here they are voting, what I would say is against Democratic Party values.
Yeah.
And what's happening here is that, I just want to refer back to earlier in the COVID crisis here in Washington State, where our farm workers were completely left out of COVID protections with PPE, where there was a mandate in our state for all employers to be providing protections. And in Yakima County, where a lot of our agriculture is in the state, the rates of COVID were 3-4 times higher than in other counties, and it was farm workers, and they had to go on strike to demand their rights. And so seeing that these undocumented immigrants, these hard laborers that do supply the food for our tables, just get left out of this legislation as a matter of course, it's really abominable, and we've got to do better.
Yeah. Robin, what do you think?
I really think that, it's just disappointing, especially to those Dems at that point. If you truly don't believe in supporting our most vulnerable, our most people, like Thomas said, who aren't earning a lot of money, but they're still paying, most of them do still pay taxes, and they're still like contributing to our economy. They're the reason that we are able to eat at this point. And it's just disheartening. Like,
it's like, don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I just want to point out about Joe Manchin, because the DSCC put millions of dollars into Joe Manchin's pocket to protect him from Paula Jean in the primary, right? So the DSCC protected Joe Manchin, and this is the guy who's going to completely override every single decision apparently going forward. So, I mean, there's no excuse for this. Like, you put millions of dollars to protect this man, yet now he's suddenly going to decide, you know what, I'm going to be the vote that kills every single bill going out.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to something also not that great. So there's new claims of migrant abuse as ICE defies Biden to continue deportations. The U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has been denounced as a rogue agency after new allegations of assaults on asylum seekers emerged, and deportations of African and Caribbean migrants continued in defiance of the Biden administration's orders. Now, Joe Biden had unveiled his immigration agenda on Tuesday, and his Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, I want to say that's how you pronounce his last name, was confirmed by the Senate, but continued deportations suggested the Biden White House still does not have full control of ICE, which faces multiple allegations of human rights abuses and allegations that it has disproportionately targeted Black migrants. Also, they literally took out uteruses out of women.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fact that we still have ICE is pissed. Just, someone take over. Jason, go.
Well, I really only have two words to say, and that's abolish ICE.
Yeah, simple.
There you go.
Yeah.
But I will say I wanted to bring up, so it doesn't make sense to me that the president can't have control of his own department in this way.
Exactly.
That just is not, that is really not gelling for me. I just literally don't understand how that can be possible. And if that's the case, I mean, yank Alejandro and put somebody else in charge who is going to do what your directive is as president. So that's step one. But the other thing I wanted to say is local areas can have control over ICE. So, I tweeted not long ago that Cowlitz County here in Washington has notified ICE that they are going to end their contracts to house ICE prisoners. But reading deeper into the article that I posted, it is actually something that we believe is going to pass the state legislature. We are a democratically controlled legislature. And so it looks to me, and I haven't gotten the bill number yet, but it looks to me like Washington state may ban ICE from operating in the state. And that's fantastic, because in Tacoma, we have an ICE detention center that has been rife with human rights abuses. And so I'm very excited at the prospect of Washington state shutting ICE down, at least in this state. All I can do is encourage people to get their own states to follow suit.
Yeah. Robin, what do you think?
I agree with Jason. Abolish ICE, man. If it's an agency that's literally defying the orders of the person of the commander in chief, like, what's the point of keeping it around? Like, I'm pretty sure, I don't want to speak for people, but I'm pretty sure there were like FBI agents or like Secret Service agents who disagreed with presidents in the past, maybe our very recent ex-president, but they still protected him. They still did their jobs. They listened to their orders. If you're joining a law enforcement agency, you don't get the choice to pick and choose your orders. You have to follow the law, and essentially, I know executive order isn't law, but that's your commander in chief. Like, listen.
Yeah.
There were probably FBI agents and like ICE agents or even DHS agents who didn't care for some of the previous policies, but they still had to enforce it. they still had to listen. They still can't disagree and refuse orders in the public, which is what ICE is doing. So if they're not listening, either fire every single agent who's not listening and then move on from there, or abolish an agency that has no point. That's prior to its existence, those duties were carried out by a previous agency. Like, I don't understand the formation of a whole new agency just to carry out like a very specific duty that a previous agency was already doing.
Yeah, exactly. Thomas, go ahead and close the segment up for us. What do you think?
I mean, they're a rogue agency. I mean, don't like. I mean, it needs to be abolished. I mean, my point is, I mean, a lot of people I see online are trying to deflect from Biden, saying it was a Trump judge that halted, or at least made it so that they were able to just keep following through with deportations. But my beef is that Biden has the power to fire the director. He has the power to fire the deputy director. He has the power to fire 8 assistant directors, and he can fire 3 executive associate directors. If these people are not following the rules set out by the highest office in this country,
fire them and abolish it. Like, and every day that Biden chooses not to do this, not only is he making himself look weak, and he's also complicit. Yeah.
And I think this is the biggest problem with the Biden platform, was that he was pushed to even do the bare minimum of doing a 100-day moratorium on deportations.
Yeah.
Right? I remember we saw the videos from the guy, the immigrant activist, and I don't know if you remember, during the primary, where he was asked, like, will you commit to 0 deportations on day 1?
Was this and then, go vote for somebody else?
Yeah. And then Biden goes, go vote for Trump then. Yeah. That was his response. And so we know that he's really not wanting to do this, like, at all.
Right.
But every day he chooses not to act on this, he's making ICE just seem like it can just override every single as if it's just its own agency, as if it just has no accountability, and it's wrong.
All right, everyone, let's go ahead and welcome Congressional Candidate Maebe A. Hello.
Hello.
Love the mask.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on Okay Now What. We'll all go around and ask you something, but go ahead and tell us who you are. Talk about your campaign, girl. Go ahead.
Yes. Hey, everybody. My name is Maebe, and I am running for Congress in 2022. This is my second campaign. I ran for Congress in 2020 here in California, District 28, which is West Hollywood, Silver Lake, Echo Park, the Hollywood Hills, Burbank, Glendale, Sunland, Tahunga, La Crescenta, so pretty much all the way up to the LA Forest. So it's a really big district, and I'm super excited to be running for a second time. We are running on a totally progressive platform. We believe in Medicare for all, for a Green New Deal, for abolishing ICE. We're about as progressive as it gets. And we are running against a Democrat, a very moderate centrist Democrat who has been in office for more than 20 years at this point. His name is Adam Schiff. He has recently been quite popular because of his anti-Trump rhetoric. But we decided to run against him because, again, like I said, he is a moderate, he's a centrist, and our beliefs are far to the left of his. So we're excited to be in the race again, and I have so much that I want to talk about. So I'm curious to hear what your questions are, because I could go on for hours about why I want to run, but I want to and I thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. Robin, go ahead and if you have any questions for maybe.
For sure. So first of all, I looked through when I heard that you were going to be our guest this week, I looked through your campaign website, sort of looked you on all the socials, and a little bit about me. I'm sort of in the sphere of like electing women, helping to elect women and people, minorities to office. And I'm a little bit of a nerd and a nut about that and like the challenges they face. So like, what are some of the challenges that you've faced while campaigning? How have you been combating, like, some of the ignorant rhetoric you may be getting, and sort of like your plans on campaigning for a second time in 2022? What have you learned? What are you going to do different? And sort of in that sort of question space.
Thank you so much, Robin. I really appreciate that question, and it's so nice to meet you. So, some of the I'm entering this campaign with the experience and the knowledge of our previous campaign, which is honestly invaluable. Now, when I entered my first campaign, we announced our first campaign in, I think it was end of June, early July, 2019. When we entered this campaign, we entered it knowing that we were going to receive pushback just because I am an unorthodox candidate. I am not what you think of when you think of a politician or somebody who's in higher office, somebody who's in the U.S. House of Representatives. And that is one of the reasons why exactly why I am running. Because if you think about what most people think about when they think about our politicians in the U.S. House of Representatives, in the Senate, you think of old, white, wealthy, cis men. And the only category that I fit into there is white. Well, I'm getting a little bit older, but well, I don't quite fit into that category yet. And I think we really have to change the idea of what we think about when we think of a politician, because our politicians are literally our representatives. And how can how can it really be representative when, again, most of these representatives are old, white, cis, wealthy men? That is not an accurate reflection of what America is. That's not an accurate reflection of what our communities are like. In fact, it's far from it. You do see that in our communities, in our states, in our country, but that is not what America is. America is made up of so many different kinds of people, and every different kind of person deserves to have representation in Congress. Now, I'm running for many, many different reasons, but one of the reasons that I'm running is because in the nearly 250-year history of the United States of America, of the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate, there has not once ever been a trans representative. So how can people in the LGBTQIA community really trust that their government is looking out for them, that their government is representing them when there's nobody like them in our government? Do you know what I mean? So while I do believe that a lot of people in our government do have good intentions, unless we actually have people like ourselves in the government speaking on behalf of people like us, we're just not going to get to the place that we need to be. So that's a big reason that I'm running. And so when I announced the first time, I knew we were going to get pushback because I'm a trans person, because I'm a drag queen. I knew that was going to happen. So, and I knew that was going to happen because I've received that sort of criticism my entire life. For somebody who's queer, most queer people have experienced that kind of, criticism. That's not something that suddenly comes about when you're an adult. That's something that you've experienced since you were a child, that you've probably experienced before you were out. So one of the great things about queer people is you develop a strength, you develop a shield, and you are able to take in that sort of hate. And although it's definitely not valid and we don't deserve it, it's something that you come to expect. And that's something that I think is awful and something that I would like to see changed. So going into this, I knew we were going to get that. And have we received that sort of hate? Absolutely. We received it in our first campaign. We've already received it in this campaign. And you know what? It is motivation to keep going and keep fighting for people like us. So, that's like a small gist of it.
I wanted to go ahead because this has been talks, and I love talking. She's such a fascinating woman, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I just like, how can you just blatantly believe in that stuff? What is your take on this woman?
You know, my take on this woman is, you know, the whole thing scares me. The fact that somebody like that could be elected to represent, to be in the highest level of office, to be in the highest level of federal government, it's terrifying. And I think the most terrifying thing is not just her beliefs, but the fact that people voted for her because of her beliefs. And I think that really a greater problem is it's not just the politicians, it's the people that put them into office. And that's really terrifying, the fact that people voted her in knowing that those are her beliefs. And that's what really scares me. And, you know, I, for one, am very happy that the House voted to remove her from her committee roles. Thank goodness. But again, it scares me that she was even elected in the first place, because her views and her point of view, I don't think is something that she's ever tried to hide. So, you know, she has used her views to get elected, and she has exploited, you know, this segment of America that is, you know, unfortunately not in favor of a lot of the rest of America. A lot of people like you and I, a lot of people of color, a lot of people who aren't, again, cis, white, wealthy, heteronormative people.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is really terrifying. And I truly hope that she's a one-term candidate or a one-term congressperson.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thomas, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just to add to that conversation, going to say that people forget, but Harvey Milk was assassinated by a representative for his views and his life. So, you know, it's really terrifying. And yeah, she needs to be a one-term congresswoman. But my question, really, before you came on, maybe we were talking about ICE. And what's happening right now with ICE just refusing to acknowledge Biden's order on a 100-day moratorium. And I wanted to ask, if you were elected, what would you do to curtail the efforts of ICE in your country?
You know, if I was elected, I would be very vocal and outspoken, as I am now, about the necessity of abolishing ICE. You know, that's an issue that's very important to me, especially as it pertains to this particular congressional district that I'm running in. The district that I live in and that I'm running in is more than 25% Latinx. You know, many of them are immigrants or immediate descendants of immigrants, and many of them are undocumented. And you know what? All of them deserve the same exact rights. I don't want to see anybody, you know, forcefully removed from my district, from my area, and deported. And you're seeing that happen every single day. You're seeing that happen with, you know, families are being destroyed and separated. And these are not criminals that we're talking about. These are not like violent criminals. You know, there's a lot of campaigns right now for specific individuals who are, you know, about to be deported, who have families here, who have lived here since, they've lived here for decades. And I just don't see, I don't understand the reason why it's such a necessity to spend so much money on government resources to remove people who are literally a part of the community fabric here, not just in Silver Lake or in LA, but, you know, across America. You know, immigrants make America work. And that's why it really, I think it's just so despicable how so many people view immigrants. And on top of that, just like the idea that America was built by immigrants, you know, the whole thing is all about immigrants. And to say, oh, well, these immigrants, you know, who came in and colonized America, well, they were okay. You know, those were some sort of heroes. But these immigrants that we have now, they've got to go. Like, it just makes no sense whatsoever. And it's so, you know, indicative of white supremacy and of colonialism and, you know, this trying to hold some sort of power And, you know, I do think that a lot of people are wising up that America is so much more than you know, rich white people. And for the longest time, that's what it was portrayed to be. And we're starting to see that, you know, I think that a lot of those people who benefited from that are scared right now, because they see that America is a lot more than that. And we are, you know, we want to speak up and we want to be a part of the society. We're done being second-class citizens. You know, we want equality for all, you know, which I think is something worth fighting for.
Yeah.
I agree. Jason, go ahead.
Well, the first thing I want to say is I'm so glad you're running again. Our races, I'm running again too in Washington's 2nd District, and what we're running on, the platform that we're running on, is I would imagine 99% parallel. So I learned a lot of things in my last race, and obviously anybody who takes on this undertaking is going to learn a lot. I did want to pop in there that I am one cishet white male who stands for all of those things and to uplift all communities. And I am tired of, like, the most exciting person in Congress to me right now is Cori Bush. I mean, she is absolutely on fire. And not only do we need to expel Marjorie Taylor Greene, we need to expel the other 146 seditionists that the Biden administration, the Democratic Party, is still negotiating with. So, you know, it's almost like we are in a hostage situation with these people in our government. But the thing I really wanted to ask you about your race and thinking about things that you have learned along the way. In terms of talking about your opponent, Adam Schiff, my understanding of him is he is sort of socially liberal, but when it comes to economic issues and military issues, much like the guy I'm challenging, he is very conservative, votes for all of the war machine money. Have you changed any perspective, or are you going to kind of go after him? How are you approaching him as an opponent in this race?
Thank you so much for bringing that up, Jason. And also thank you for running and trying to fight the system that is in place. That's such an important question. And, you know, when I first decided to run a few years ago, one of the reasons I decided to run was because there were no progressive candidates, and I thought that we needed a progressive candidate. I think that it's okay to challenge people within your party. I think when you don't do that, it reinforces the status quo. When you reinforce the status quo, nothing happens. When you challenge your party to do better and be better, that's when things happen. And that was one of the reasons I felt like I needed to challenge Adam Schiff. And the thing about Adam Schiff is that he is really mistaken as some sort of progressive hero, but he is the most faux progressive that I know of, because, you know, granted, the thing is, a lot of people think that he is progressive because he is pro LGBTQIA. He is for, you know, he says that he's for Medicare for all, and he says that he's for the Green New Deal, but I've never actually seen him tweet about these things or advocate for these things or speak up on these things. The only thing that I see Adam Schiff talk about on social media is anti-Trump rhetoric. And that has been his key to popularity, is constantly talking down Trump. And you know what? That's such an easy route, because who couldn't talk down Trump? So because he's in such a position, all he does is it's anti-Trump this, anti-Trump that. And you know, because of it, a lot of people like him. You know, he was involved with the Mueller report. That was sort of one of his big things that sort of put him in the spotlight. And then he was in charge of the first impeachment. Where did that lead? Nowhere. Now he's, you know, in prominence again for the second impeachment. And again, I think because of this, a lot of people have not look deeper into what he has voted for. Now, as a politician, I can say that you are only as good as your voting record. Your voting record is what defines you as a politician. And when you look at Adam Schiff's voting record, he is not progressive. What he has done is he has voted pro-military, pro-war for everything since the early 2000s. Actually, since about 1996, when he was elected to the California Senate. So a lot of
Oh.
things that people don't know about him is that, you know, a lot of the pro-police, pro-police actions and laws that were written in California in the late 1990s were actually written by Adam Schiff, introduced by him through the California Senate. And those are the things that, increased funding for police, put in place programs that were putting juveniles in prison. He wrote legislation that was putting people as young as 14 in prison.
Ugh.
And I think that's absolutely despicable. And a lot of people don't know about that because they think, oh, Adam Schiff, he's trying to get Trump out of office. Well, what else has he done? He has put kids in prison. He has voted for the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war. He voted to support the Saudi invasion of Yemen. Literally every military issue that has come across his desk, he's voted in favor of. Every single year when it's time to authorize the defense budget, he consistently votes for the defense budget, which is getting close to $1 trillion a year, which is, it's more than 7 times the next 7 countries' budget combined. We don't need a military budget this large. And every year he's voting to increase it. So, I get so upset talking about him because like he's done so many slick and sly things under the radar that people need to know about. And this is all clearly stated in his voting record.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I would like to suggest for your campaign and for your website is if you go to my campaign website, callforcongress.com, there's a tab on there called Rick's Receipts. And basically we have broken down all of his contributions from 6 different big sectors, military industrial complex, banking industry, healthcare industry. And we've gone back again, this 20-year record of him he came to Congress through the lobbying industry, the medical lobbying industry. And he's been a lobbyist and he's been a war hawk his whole life. And people in my district have the same idea that because he says the word progressive and because he says the word environmentalist, that they're going to take that at face value. But you can't be progressive when you get 75% of your funding from corporate sources. And so to really comb through those FEC filings and say, this is who Adam Schiff has taken the money from, and let's match up those votes with the money that he has taken, really draws a clearer picture. Now, it didn't help me in my last race because, like you said, everybody was so, we've got to get Trump. And that's all the guy I am against was campaigning on, help me defeat Trump. That was his only message. And I'm sad that, in Washington has top 2, just like California. I think we're actually the only 2 states that have top 2. And my message to the district was, if you put this corporatist on the ballot next to an actual progressive, then we actually get to have some real policy dialogue. You put him up against this, Republican who doesn't even have a chance of winning this seat. There's no dialogue. There's no substantive dialogue on policy anymore. And so that's something that I think progressives, particularly here in Washington and California, need to communicate about the primary system in our states. Get 2 Democrats on the ballot next to each other and let's have a real conversation.
100%. I'm so glad you brought that, Jason, because that's such a great point that a lot of voters don't understand, because voting laws and the way that the voting structure works is so different state by state. But oftentimes this conversation that we're having about voting is kind of on a national level. We talk about it on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, but really it's different in every given state. And that was also one of the reasons that why I chose to run in 2020 was because I knew that if I advanced through the primary, it would be an ideal situation. It would be a moderate centrist Democrat versus a very progressive Democrat. And that's actually the most ideal situation for, in particular, a district like mine. My district votes on average at least 75% Democratic every election cycle. So what that means is, even if it is a Democrat and a Republican in the general election, virtually the Democrat doesn't really have to do anything because the voters alone, just by party affiliation, are going to elect them in. And so that's why when I missed advancing to the general election in 2020, Adam Schiff was probably able to take a nice deep breath because he knew that he didn't have to go up against anybody. He knew that he was going to win by default.
Absolutely the case. Absolutely the
Mhm.
case. The guy I ran against didn't mention my name. He did not give my campaign any airtime. He never addressed the fact that there was a progressive running against him. He always talked about the inevitable Republican that he was going to face, which just allowed him to avoid any serious policy discussions whatsoever.
Mhm.
You know, and unfortunately, you know, there's name recognition, there's fundraising, there are things that you have to do as a candidate that as a progressive are much harder within the system that exists, and that's why, you know, people like us, we have to come back a second time now that we have more name recognition and understand what campaigning is about a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe thank you so much for coming on. Shout out your social media and your website.
Thank you so much, Greg. I can be found all across the internet. Well, not too deep into the internet, but you can find it on our website, maebeagirlforcongress.org. That's MAEBEAGIRL for Congress.org. You can find me on Instagram at maebeagirl. And you can find me on Twitter at maybe_A_girl.
Awesome. And please go volunteer for her. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. And that is this week's episode of Okay Now What? Thank you for watching. Reminder, we upload on Saturdays on YouTube and IGTV and our Facebook. Our social media is down below. And if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe and ring that bell to know every time we post. And give us a follow, OK_now what 21 on IG and Twitter. All right. See y'all next week.